Welcome to today's special council meeting of March 7th, 2025 at 10 a.m. I would like to call the meeting to order. The purpose of this special council meeting is to receive presentation from Pinchin regarding the township's waste disposal sites. At this time, I would like to remind committee members and members of the public in attendance that all committee and council meetings are recorded. Please note that these recordings may capture comments made during meetings or in breaks or recesses. Recordings will be available to the public on the municipal YouTube channel for members to view. The public may also attend the open session of this meeting in person in the municipal council chambers. Please mute all electronic devices during the meeting. And now I'll continue with the First Nations land acknowledgement. As we gather today, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. So I do have a recommendation to adopt the agenda. The recommendation is that the special council meeting agenda for March 7th, 2025 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move into delegations and presentations. And we have our waste management presentation by Alana and Tim this morning. So I'd like to welcome both of you, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen with our slides. There we go. Okay, Tim is just caught up in another meeting this morning, but he'll be joining in a few minutes, so I'll just get started in the meantime.
Okay.
So our speaker today will be Tim once he gets here. I think everyone here is probably familiar with me and Tim by now from Pinchin, but we are the landfill monitoring and design consultants for your sites. And today we're going to do a presentation to go over the 2024 annual monitoring results and recommendations for each of the waste disposal sites. Then we'll go over the Bark Lake feasibility study report, and then the proposal for the MECP action plan. So firstly, we'll go over the 2024 results and recommendations. First, with the POG closed waste disposal site. So the current monitoring network at POG is 11 groundwater monitoring wells and 4 surface water monitoring locations. The positions of the monitoring locations are shown on the figure here. So we have some background locations, some source locations, and then mostly down gradient locations. Based on the 2024 groundwater and surface water monitoring results, Pinchin has not identified any significant landfill-related impacts for the POG site. The site has been closed since 2004, and the water quality is generally stabilized here now. So our recommendation for this site is that the annual groundwater and surface water sampling programs should be discontinued following approval from the MECP. So we may have to continue monitoring the site for an additional year or so until we do receive formal approval from the MECP to stop monitoring. Once we do receive approval to discontinue the monitoring program, it is recommended that the annual inspections and maintenance for the final cover at the site continue to be completed to ensure the integrity of the cap is maintained. For the Wilno waste transfer site, the current monitoring program here is 10 groundwater monitoring wells. There's 2 historic surface water stations, as you can see on the figure, but those are no longer sampled. So based on the 2024 groundwater results, Pinchin has not identified significant landfill impacts at this site either. The site has also been closed for many years, since 1997, I think. So our recommendation here is to also discontinue the groundwater sampling program for the site following formal approval from the MECP. Since this site is a waste transfer station, the transferred waste volumes for the site would have to continue to be reported annually to the MECP, but that can be included under the Bark Lake Waste Disposal Site report, since that is the receiving site. And then following approval for discontinuing the monitoring program from the MECP, the monitoring wells that are at the site should be decommissioned in accordance with Ontario Regulation 903. And that recommendation would apply to the POG site as well, or any site where we discontinue the water quality sampling program. For the Barry's Bay closed waste disposal site, the program here is 10 groundwater monitoring wells and 5 surface water monitoring locations. And based on the 2024 groundwater and surface water results, Pinchin has not identified any significant landfill-related impacts here. The site has also been closed since approximately 1998. There are some quantified exceedances that we observed, but they are limited to non-health related parameters, and they don't appear to be solely derived from the landfill deposits, and they may be occurring due to other sources at this site. So following approval from the MECP to discontinue the monitoring program, the monitoring wells at this site would also be decommissioned in accordance with OREG 903 as well. And for all 3 of these sites, which we're recommending discontinuing the program, if the MECP doesn't agree with these recommendations, then we would plan to go back to them and request reductions to the monitoring or reporting programs instead. So maybe removing some of the sampling locations that we don't need anymore, or decreasing the frequency to just the spring instead of the spring and the fall, or reducing the reporting frequency from every year to every other year. For the Radcliffe waste transfer site, the monitoring program here is 9 groundwater wells and 4 surface water locations. And based on the 2024 groundwater and surface water results, we did identify some limited landfill related impacts for this site. So we recommend continuing with the water quality monitoring for 2025 to better assess the groundwater quality. The MECP did approve some reductions to the monitoring program for this site. So starting in 2025, the monitoring for groundwater and surface water is only going to occur in the spring and fall, and that summer event is no longer required. And for the reporting frequency, it'll be reduced to biannually instead of annually, so only every other year. For the Bark Lake Waste Disposal site, the monitoring network here is quite a bit bigger than the other sites. It's 23 groundwater wells and 4 surface water locations. And based on the 2024 groundwater and surface water results, Pynchon did identify some landfill-related impacts at the site, mostly in the immediate vicinity of the waste deposits, and they do appear to start to improve with distance from the waste deposits, but we would recommend continuing the groundwater and surface water monitoring programs. There are some repairs that we identified for a few of the monitoring wells at the site. So 4 of the wells would require the PVC riser pipe to be cut shorter to allow the steel outer casing to close properly. And 1 of the wells requires a well cap to cover the well. And 1 of the wells requires the removal of a blockage within the well PVC. So Pynchon, we would require a small change order to complete these repairs in 2025. For the removal of the blockage, we would just inspect that blockage again in the spring and see if we can remove it ourselves before we would retain any driller subcontractor for that one, as that would be a higher cost. Some additional recommendations for Bark Lake. Future reports should include some additional contours for chloride and boron concentrations in combination with the Piper plot analysis. And this is required in order to delineate the plume extent and differentiate between impacts that are related to the landfill and impacts that are related to potentially the roads maintenance salting activities in the winter. Some of the wells for this site for the down gradient wells are positioned adjacent to the roadway. So there's some chloride impacts from the salting could be showing up in those wells. So this would just help to determine that. And pH should be added back to the lab analysis to increase the accuracy of this Piper plot analysis. Right now we're using the pH readings collected in the field rather than pH measured in the lab. So it's just a slightly less accurate. And in the absence of scales, the annual topographic surveys should continue to be completed to keep tracking the volume for this site. So the next survey is scheduled for the fall of 2025. Continuing with Bark Lake, Tim can speak about the feasibility study now.
Excellent. Sorry I was late, everyone. Thanks for having us. Alana, I should let you do all the presentations. Okay, let's continue to the next slide, please. So yeah, in the recent year, we've been working on a feasibility assessment for waste management strategy for the community. So one of the things we looked at was, what's the lifespan left that we have in Bark Lake? So I think when I last had the opportunity to speak to council and staff, we talked about, how much volume was in the landfill site. So based on the surveys that Alana just closed her presentation with, we do those annual surveys, and the reason we do that is to make sure we have a great understanding of how much waste you receive on an annual basis. And then from that, we can extrapolate, what's the lifespan left based on the approved volume of the site. So using that data that Alana has provided, we estimate we have about 9.5 years left on the existing Bark Lake approval. So what we wanted to do is figure out what's our next step, right? And I think it was probably a year ago we talked about, well, maybe we expand up the hill in the back, or maybe we go in some different directions. And So this particular study, we wanted to look at what opportunities were there, both to expand the Bark Lake site and maybe even go and look at, hey, some other currently owned city lands, township owned lands. Where could we go? Like what other opportunities do we have? So in order to do that, we did this feasibility study. The very first exercise we do is kind of like a mapping exercise of no-go zones, right? So our GIS group worked with the mapping that you guys have, and then also overlaid that with a bunch of different provincially available layers. And we tried to figure out like what was available to us for lands and what would we consider to be no-go zones. So, for example, you can't be within 500 meters of a drilled water well, and you can't be within 8 kilometers of an airport, and you can't be, within 100 meters of a water body. So once you start to overlay all that stuff on the mapping, the available real estate for a landfill site really starts to shrink. So that was a big part of our exercise. And then on top of that, we also looked at the mapping and said, well, okay, is there any areas of, natural scientific significance? Is there parts of the community that have been mapped as, blanding turtle habitat, or, some other weird and wonderful species at risk that we would want to stay away from? So we started to look at those limitations as well. And again, it starts to shrink down our available lands. And then other considerations we looked into it was, social and cultural and economic considerations of what would it take to build a new site and or expand the existing site, and what are your permit implications, and what would we feel would be the general pushback from the community, et cetera, et cetera. So, Landon, you can go ahead, please. So this is the mapping exercise that I kind of talked about. This is zoomed in on the Bark Lake site itself. So you can see the green and the yellow are zones that are generally acceptable for landfill expansion. And then the Bark Lake site itself is already a landfill site, so it's, I don't want to say it's grandfathered in, but it definitely has some attributes that lend itself, to being a great site for expansion, in that you already have an existing monitoring well network, as Lana alluded to. It's very robust. I'm not saying we wouldn't have to supplement it, but you got a great head start there. You got a good understanding of what your baseline conditions are. It's pretty much, all disturbed lands already. So any archaeological concerns and stuff like that have already been, removed. And actually, Bark Lake actually has an archaeological study done on it previously as part of its earlier permitting process. So there's lots of boxes that are checked off on this one. So it actually, it lends itself, to being a positive site. Elena, you want to go ahead with this? We looked at the greater community as well, and tried to do a similar mapping exercise, and tried to find, no-go zones and that sort of thing. So you can see like there's a lot of area in the middle, between all the other limitations, that becomes, kind of pink and not necessarily where we want to be. So then like the rest of the areas that are green seem to be more to the north, and obviously, you guys are even more familiar with the community than I am. Some of the limitations going to the north are, infrastructure and roadways and stuff like that. So and a lot of those roadways that do exist there I wouldn't even call them secondary. They're very, very small roadways. And do you want to start putting dump trucks and stuff like that on those? So those are the kind of socio factors that we factor into it, right? We don't want kids standing on the side of a tiny little road waiting for a school bus, and we've got a stream of dump trucks continually going by. Whereas your Bark Lake site is on a highway that and it's somewhat remote. So those concerns, for example, when we start to weigh those and rank those sites, those things kind of factor in as well. Okay, go ahead, Alana. So we called the expansion of Bark Lake site. We considered that to be site A, and then we had a couple other sites. If you read our report, we had a couple of different sites B, C, and D that we identified just based on how much space was available, and then we worked through a ranking system, a numeric ranking system, and we applied numeric values to lots of different categories, like again, species at risk, archaeology, proximity to wells, proximity to existing roadways, how much would it cost to implement certain things, develop a whole new landfill site, cut down a whole bunch of trees, blah blah blah. So anyways, once you get to the end of that whole thing, you can see through the process, like there is identified advantages and disadvantages to each and every site. But once you start to get through it, you really see some of the stuff starts to wash itself out, and you are left at the end with a preferred alternative that I think is pretty it's pretty in your face. So Alana, you want to continue, please? So yeah, this is where the three sites that we kind of looked at were for A, B, and C, and D, sorry. So A, of course, is the Bark Lake expansion. B is a little bit further down the highway. We thought we'd try and take advantage of that small little green area and stay as close to the highway as we could, so we could alleviate some of those factors to see if we could come up with a better site. And then C and D, they were remote, so we were trying to get up into areas where we wouldn't necessarily have as much public concerns, let's call it. And then, of course, those areas are restricted by the lack of infrastructure in those areas, so they quickly wash out as something that's not that feasible. So once we got to this stage of the report, I felt, or this study, I felt like there was a need to, kind of take it to the next level for you and show, what the Bark Lake site expansion, one of the potentials, or how could we make it work, right? So I think that was our next step, was, kind of do a conceptual design of what it would look like. So Alana, can you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, it doesn't really show very well here, and I apologize for that. The black line is the existing approved landfill footprint. So what we thought we would do is probably do like a phased expansion here. And what the first thing we thought we'd do is go into what we call phase one, and that's the purple area to the south. That area has already been, a lot of it's already been cleared. It's within the existing footprint of the landfill, which is part of the licensed area. And it equates to like a 1.5 hectare expansion. So, and the reason I picked that area first is I thought if we started to put waste down there, we could potentially prep the phase two area, which doesn't show up very well, and I apologize for that, but it's to the east of the existing landfill site. So you can see it, it's kind of that teal Smurf blue color. Alana, does your mouse, you don't have a pointer, right? On this, on Zoom? No. Okay. Anyways, I can see your mouse, Alana. Maybe you can just highlight or whip around the blue area. Thank you. So yeah, it's just a little triangle. So anyways, I thought if we did the purple area first, and we had garbage going down, we could use the sand in the side of the hill in the phase two area as our interim cover. So we're essentially killing two birds with one stone, in that you're covering your landfill in phase one, but you're also prepping phase two as you're, working towards it. And we really would want to work towards like a progressive closure anyway, so that we'd be, closing cells as we go, because we don't want to end up having a monster waste pile here all open at one time. But yeah, so I guess the punchline of the whole thing, the whole feasibility study, to wrap it up for everyone, is the expansion of the Bark Lake site was the preferred alternative after we looked at a number of different sites. And I think it ranked the highest on almost every, well, I think it ranked the highest in every category whether that be environmental, ease of permitting, ease of construction, costs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, this was the end game that we came up with. And again, this is just a conceptual, cartoon. There would have to be a considerable amount of work that goes into this to progress it to the actual permitted stage. And it may be that the new areas, the purple and the blue area, are going to be subject to, different landfill standards than we're currently held to. But I think that kind of washes out, because any landfill site, like whether we expand this site or we go to a new site, that would probably be consistent across the board. And what I mean by that is that we might be required to prep the base of those two areas and put in a liner and have a leachate collection system, or something like that. So we won't know that until we get into it with the ministry. And that might be something that they come back. But again, this current site, the way it's set up, with topography and that sort of thing, there's definitely some opportunities to take advantage of some natural features there. And you could put in a leachate collection system here that is above the water table, and could be, gravity driven for the most part to a collection pipe, a header pipe. And then from there, maybe you need to pump it or whatever. But again, you have the infrastructure to support any of those potential additional requests from the ministry to, take this site up to the current standards, let's call it. So, yeah, I think that was all I had on this one, Alana, or was there more to it? Okay.
No, that's all. So I can go over the MECP action plan proposal as well. So the ministry did an inspection.
Sorry, if I may, there are a few questions, if that's okay, if you wanted to take questions at this time.
Hi.
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
Hi, Tim and Lan. It's Shelley Micah. Before we go into a whole other area, I just wanted to, on the expansion, when I'm looking at the map, so the red lined area, that's our current Casland footprint. Is that what we currently have for the Caslands, or is that an expansion of the Caslands?
That's the currently owned lands, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious because as we're expanding, I guess that's southeast, the purple line, the border isn't moving for the containment zone, right? Is that going to be okay, or will we have to approach the ministry to expand the CAS zone on the southeast side?
Yeah, so again, that's a great question. So the yellow line or the orange line that kind of goes around the whole proposed area existing and the two new phases, that's a buffer zone.
Okay.
So that's dictated in the landfill standards. So we've kind of designed this layout to incorporate that buffer zone. So yeah, obviously you can't put your garbage right up to your property line. So we've honored that part of the guidance document and the regulations by providing the buffer between the property line.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really working it's working in our favor in this site is, the topography that we have, and groundwater flow mirrors the topography, and that it goes from, the mountain, let's call it, towards the low-lying surface water features. So even though we're very close to the property line along that side, or it looks like we're close in this drawing, the predominant groundwater flow direction is to the southwest. So
good. Okay. Good.
Yeah, it's not like we're expecting the leachate plume to propagate to the east. So yeah, And in reality, we're probably going to have to put a couple wells, to the southwest of that purple area, because I think the existing monitoring well network just kind of ends right at the black. So that would probably be part of the application process and the approval processes. They would want to see us, build out the monitoring network a little bit. But I mean, that would be the addition of 3 wells versus at a new site where you'd have to install probably 15 to 20, right? But that's a great question.
It's just the reason I asked that is because we've, with the other sites, particularly the Barry's Bay site, we had to purchase additional CAS, like we had to extend the CAS buffer zone after the fact. And I'm assuming this is Crown land, so we're not dealing with a private landowner, thank God. But I'm thinking in terms of holding up the process. So that sort of leads me to my next question. Assuming all of the ducks line up and the stars are in our favor, do you have now this is just an opinion, do you have an estimate or a gut feeling like how long would this process take if the ministry was kind of okay with what we're proposing? Are we talking years and years and years, or 1 to 3 years, or 5 to 10 years, or do you think if they were okay with what's being presented?
Yeah, I mean, last June, I think it was, the ministry issued new guidance documents as far as expanding existing landfills in order to make it easier.
Oh, good.
Unfortunately, again, we'd have to look at it and see if you actually need this much. That's the other piece, right? Like this is ultimate extents. I don't know that you need all of this right now. Alana and I would have to look at that as well, because as we extend the footprint, there's also the potential that we could maybe increase the height on the existing area, right? Because we are limited. We have to do 4-to-1 side slopes and a 20-to-1 crown. So because we have those restrictions on us, it does limit how high we can go. But as you start to spread your footprint out, you get to go a little bit higher. So we could potentially go on top of the existing landfill, and maybe we don't need to have as big a footprint. So yeah, it may be that once we look at the anticipated waste volumes and the site life and whatever, maybe we can get it down to something closer to those new triggers or those new limits. But I think they said for a site of your size, they would only increase the volume by 25% without having to go through a provincial EA process. Right. I don't know that increasing by 25% is going to get us what we want. Yeah. So that'll be something we have to look at it as well. And I could work with Hillary and the group on that. But I mean, that is always an option. Maybe we just go for a 25% expansion, try not to trigger any kind of provincial environmental assessment process. But once you do that, I don't think you're allowed to go back to them and say, hey, can we get another 25% and another 25%? Yeah. So if we decide that, we want to try and build something here to give us a 25-year site life, and that 25-year site life exceeds that 25% expansion, well, then we would have to go through an EA process. So we've done an expansion very similar to this in another community, and that was about a 5-year process.
Okay. I'm just curious on the time frame.
Yeah, and that's because we did trigger a provincial EA on that one. So, and the reason it takes so long is you probably have to drill new wells, like I said, and establish some kind of baseline for groundwater, and you'll have to do like bugs and bunnies and that sort of things, and you can only do those studies at certain times a year. Yeah. So if you don't queue all that stuff up in year one, like they're deregistered. It's a bad example now, but everybody knows them, so I always speak to it. Like whippoorwills, for example, the breeding or the survey season for whippoorwills was always historically the full moon in June. So like if we weren't out there during the full moon in June, well, guess what? You got to wait all the way to next June before you can do that assessment, right? So stuff like that and hurdles like that kind of make the process a little bit slower. There is a need for public consultation and Indigenous consultation as well. That kind of slow things down, and it's necessary. It's part of the process, but it does. Usually, that's not just a one-time visit, right? Usually, you would set up. We would typically do at least 3 consultations during a project, an EA type project. So. And you don't want to bombard them month after month, so you have to space them out. So yeah, in general, the whole process is probably 5 years if we go through the EA process. If we avoid the EA process, you're probably looking in that 3-year range.
Okay, so again, so I just want to then ask on based on the 2 scenarios. So going for the full thing that you've presented, we would have to go through the EAA process. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're looking at possibly 5 years. If you go with the 25% expansion route, we're avoiding a lot. If we were to receive that 25% expansion, you're estimating currently we have about 9.5 years. If we were to add that, if we were able to do the 25%, how many years would we be looking at in total for the site? Like, would that get us 20 years if we added 25%? Because what you're proposing here is getting us like 30 some years, right? Or more, if based on the current fill rates.
Yeah. Alana, what's the approved volume on this site? Is it 208,000?
I think so.
All right. Yeah, we'd have to do some math on it. I'd have to figure out like how much you guys bring in a year and what would so the 25% is based on your total approved volume too, right? It's not what's left. So yeah, there's a potential there that it could equate to something substantial. So yeah, I think your approved volume is 200 and let's just round it off 210,000 cubic meters. So we could potentially get, a 50,000 cubic meter expansion on this. So I'd have to figure out how much you guys eat up every year. I thought we ate up about 7,000.
10,000.
Is it 10,000?
10,000 cubes a year.
Population.
When it was in COVID, we were at 14,000 cubes a year.
Yeah.
Currently now we're running 9,000 to 10,000 cubes a year, so it gets you 5 years.
5 years. So best case scenario with that, we would be literally looking at best case scenario getting 15 years. And then we've kind of cut our throats to go any further with that. I don't know if that's...
Well, the whole thing is too, and this is my opinion, and is like if we're going through the whole EA process, like essentially what you just told us, we're basically opening up a new landfill on an existing landfill, right? So it's sort of one of those, do we even waste our time opening up a new landfill behind an existing landfill in Bark Lake, or do we find somebody else better suited, right? And the reason why I say that is because, Tim, you're saying the whole thing, like, 4 to 1 side slopes, yeah, we're going to gain a little bit of height, but that Bark Lake's also on the side of a stupid hill here, right? And if it's on a hill, well, it's eating away at possible capacity, right? Because you need to keep the 4 to 1 side slope. So is it even worthwhile looking at, if we're going through the whole process to open a new landfill, do we do it at the site or not at the site? Because there'd be a better suited location. And my other opinion would be is go for the whole thing, right? If we are doing the EA process, it's get the whatever we're doing, you go for the phase 1 and phase 2, because every day that goes by, it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to get a landfill or stuff approved, because there's turtles and birds and this and that, right? So, like, in my opinion, it'd be go through, but I don't want to spend a bunch of money here if it doesn't make sense. And to me, the topography, like the Bark Lake, doesn't make sense if we're going through the whole process of opening a new landfill, right? To build a dirt road entrance in off of Highway 60, just up the road, into a site that's better suited is nothing, right? Compared to having to, spend all this money expanding the landfill to find out that we won't get the volume that we want, right?
Where I don't know where you're referring, Joseph. Where do you think the better...
B, right up the highway.
B.
And your concerns with that one, Tim, was because you had, sorry, I'm trying to find the page.
Well, it's just infrastructure, not but everything. It's essentially the same, right? And you're on a hill and you don't have a stream coming by because that's higher elevation up there too, right? On that chunk of 60, you go, you know, you're at the bottom of the hill on the corner, right? Then you're going up the hill, then it all flattens out up on the plateau, right? Okay, well, we aren't building a landfill up a hill anymore, right? That's kind of good. It's just if we're going through the whole process, we have to make sure that, okay, we're getting the bang for our dollars. Because it's going to cost a pile of money to line a landfill. If we have to line the bottom of the side of a hill here, that's costing a lot of money, right? So let's make sure it's worth it, right?
Well, that was going to be the question, what the anticipated cost of a potential leachate collection is, because that's been the terror word around here for many years, to have to.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be, to be honest, at this point. But phase 2, like into the side of the hill, don't forget we would dig into the side of the hill, so we would create volume there.
Yeah, but the
You
side
know,
of
by-
the hill, that's rock. You aren't digging, we aren't blasting rock, right? You know?
Yeah.
Like it's rock, it's bedrock. That's a bedrock knob. The whole side of that hill, we aren't digging anything into that, right? I don't want to be stacking garbage on the side of a hill. It doesn't make sense, right? Why are we spending money, right? We need
Yeah.
somewhere that's suitable, right?
Yeah, and I think we had some bedrock concerns with B as well. But so to go through the whole process, though, you are going to have to. We don't just close the book on site B. Like if you go through the whole process, like you go through an EA, you have to. In the EA process, you have to rule out these other sites again.
Well,
essentially.
The thing is like the only reason I'm suggesting it is we want to make sure that what we're doing is right. We have time. There's 10 years to do it, right? And if we're spending this kind of money at taxpayers' dollars and this kind of money on you guys for consulting in this, we want to make sure that it's done properly the first time, right? Like it's got to be the best decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The topography of the Bark Lake site, and me personally, given the sloping that you need and this and that, right? I've rehabbed them. I rehabbed the one in Pod Lake years ago before I was a counselor with my construction company, right? I know the sloping that it needs in that. I don't think it makes sense because we're going up a hill, right? We have to be 4-1. Well, the hill isn't even 4-1 that we're going up, right? You know, it's steeper than that, so it doesn't make sense to me, right? Why we'd be, you know, spending that kind of money. Like I think last time we were talking about this expansion with Tim and that, it was okay, let's get a 25%, because remember it was on the tail end of COVID, we were putting 14,000 cubes in a year, right? And we were putting 14,000 cubes. We had 7 years left on a landfill. Tim said that it'd take 5+ to get a thing. Okay, well, what was the direction the council gave? I remember the direction the council gave. We have to look for a new site. We have to throw a 25% expansion on Bark Lake quickly because we're going to need it, right? That was the direction, and now he's coming back saying, well, let's do this big thing on Bark Lake. We don't want to do a big thing on Bark Lake, I don't think, right? It doesn't make sense, right? Given the topography, we need to find a new site because Bark Lake, it doesn't work with the side hill. That's what was discussed the last time he was here. Right? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah,
Well,
fair enough. I think what we want is the right solution, what the long-term solution is, and what the I don't want to say the word cheapest, but I mean affordable solution. Because I don't think we, you know, have tens of millions here that we can play with. So, but we need capacity too, because 9.5 years goes by quick, and that's under the assumption that the population growth stays where it's at, and we don't boom again like we did during COVID. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
But it's another thing too, right? We talked about this last year at this time, and we're getting a report a year later. Well, it doesn't take long for 10 years to go by if it takes us a year to get a report, right? We gave direction that we wanted to do something and we didn't get a report, right? Where's the report, right? Takes a year, right?
Yeah, so we can Alana and I can look at the site A and we can figure out like what volume we think we can get in there. And then, yeah, if we just do the 25% expansion on Bark, then you could look at some of these other sites for a bigger, grandiose site. I guess my point my point was like through the EA process, and you know, I apologize. I don't know who I'm speaking with directly, but yeah, you said it. We have time, and in that time, like you're not just going to say, yeah, site B is the site and let's just go do it, or site D or whatever, right? You're totally right. We would go in with a drill rig. We would confirm the ground conditions. We would confirm we have freeboard between the surface and the groundwater table. All those things factor into it so that, you know, you truly know if that is the best location for you or not. So yeah, we have a little bit of time to work with. So maybe that is the answer. And you know, like maybe we do a 25% expansion on Bark. That opens us up for another, you know, 15 years. And that takes the pressure off while we look for a bigger site, you know, and a longer term solution.
The other thing,
I'm not really convinced that we walk away from Bark though. I mean, I would like to run some numbers for you guys to see what we could actually fit in there, even if we assume the hill is totally bedrock and there's no material we can take out of there. Because the other piece, you know, I understand what you're saying. It is 4-to-1 side slopes that really limit us, but you don't have to do a 4-to-1 side slope on the hillside. Essentially what we would do there is pile the garbage against the hillside, and it would come off the hillside right into a 20-to-1 crown. And then you kind of, you know, you have your 4-to-1s on the other three sides. You don't need to have it on the back side. So like I said, Alana and I can run some numbers there for volume calcs and see what we can squeeze in. And we'll see what that equates to for you. And then, yeah, there definitely is some opportunities for us to explore site B, for example, and see if that site truly is something that could work for us.
All right, I think our CAO had a question or a comment.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I was just going to ask if possibly, like a recommendation stating that, you know, council would like the Bark Lake Waste, like to accept the study as it's presented and direct pension to narrow the study to assess the cost and feasibility of both sites A and B, including the volume counts for further consideration.
exactly.
I don't think we would be hard placed to get, you know, deeper, more detailed information, because this is a big decision to make. And, you know, not saying we should take 5 years to make it, but I think more detailed information.
It isn't getting any easier to do it, and it isn't getting any cheaper, right? You're putting an investment in the future if you got it now versus 15 years down the road, right? You're saving 50% for sure now because just the way things are going, right? And then the other thing that bothers me about the Bark Lake landfill is it looks horrible, right? You're pulling in, you're driving, you cross the culvert with a creek going through it, and oh yeah, there's the dump, right?
That worries me.
How long is that going to last before somebody comes in and has a bright idea that, oh, the fish died in the creek, and then, you know, you have everybody there and they shut it down even though it is approved, right? It's, you know, like you're taking chances. Like the location where Bark Lake is, it isn't a good location, right? You know, like there's too much environmental stuff that can happen there, and I could see it getting shut. You know, all it takes is the wrong person to drive by one day, and then we have a headache, right? Even though we do follow all the monitoring procedures and everything else, right? It's still, there's a potential there because there's a creek, right? You know?
I think one thing Councillor Olszewski is saying too that I find very important is that it's not going to get easier as we go into the future. I think the sooner we can make a decision and proceed, it's going to be easier because things are going to tighten up as we move along further and further. So I think the sooner we can make a decision, the better off we are.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
All right. Where are we going from here?
Mm-hmm.
If I may, through the chair, with council approval, I would like a council resolution. So if I may, you can amend it if you wish, that council accept the Bark Lake Waste Site Feasibility Study and direct pension to narrow the study to assess the costs and feasibility of both sites A and B to include volume capacity and length of life of the sites.
All right. You've all heard the resolution as the remover. Councillor Olszewski.
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Micah. Any discussion? Seeing none, I call a vote. All in favor? That is carried.
If I may, through the chair, just a,
Yes.
a question. Just asking Tim, do you think that recommendation is enough for you to proceed, or is there anything that I should have included?
I'll just have to see if we have enough information on B as far as like topo info and that sort of thing. But yeah, we can do a conceptual layout on B, assuming we have some topo. Even if I just use the 1 to 50,000 scale, provincial mapping, it'll give us an idea. And then yeah, we can do like a theoretical layout on that site as well and figure out what kind of capacity we could potentially fit in there.
Right.
So I think we'll be okay. Like I said, the only limiting factor would potentially be if I can't find the topo data.
Okay, Sue.
Just had a question from the treasurer. Have those applications been made to the MECP for Pog Lake and Radcliffe?
They're in the annual reports,
Okay.
but we have not. Alana, did we submit a separate letter?
No, the reports are in draft right now, and then once they're finalized, we'll have the letters and the reports submitted to the MECP.
Okay, so if we can get copies of those when that's done, just for our books to know that was done. Thank you.
So Alana, are we looking for resolution today to accept those reports, or?
And I think Hillary might have been what he was looking for. I'm not sure if he's distributed the draft reports to everyone for review.
We do have a recommendation to accept the reports on our agenda.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
That was all. I just have a question.
Go ahead.
All right. The questions?
Mark can see.
Yeah.
Hillary has his hand up.
I have a question.
Oh, I can't see Hillary. Sorry,
Okay,
Hillary.
this is Hillary here. Hi, everyone. Just circling back on Bark Lake, I read the conclusions and recommendations. Just MECP, when they did the inspection, were adamant that we only had 8.5, now we have 9.5. Hopefully it'll go to 10.5 as the volumes decrease. For long-term planning, we should have a snippet in the Bark Lake stating that what's our long-term goal moving forward. She said that I guess everybody's struggling with capacity and they want to know how we're moving this along. Without me reading that big document, did we put a snippet in there, Alana or Tim, about possible future, we're looking at expansion or what have you? They want to know that.
I think that we did, but I will double check, and if not, we'll make sure that that's covered between the draft and final version of the report.
Thank you.
Councillor Blank.
I think we lost you here. Thank you. Just a question on the feasibility study report map where it shows site A, B, C, and D. How far down from the present site A is site B, and how far off of our property line are we?
Yeah, it's about 2 kilometers from the Bark Lake site down the road, and then it's only about, I think it was about 300 meters off the highway.
Okay. And I see there's a big black line. Is that is that where our township ends?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so we're into the next township, and that is what township?
South Algonquin.
South
South
Algonquin.
Algonquin.
Will there be any harassment from them? We don't know.
I don't know, and that's
Depends on the
a
flows.
great point, because groundwater does not honor property lines, right? So, so that is something we'd have to make sure that but I think we're almost 500 meters away from that line. Not to say that a groundwater plume can't go that far, but I also don't believe we're in that direction.
Okay, so a study would show that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else from anyone?
Yeah, sorry, just one more
Councillor
section.
Micah.
So I guess this is for you, Tim. With regards to the requesting from the ministry to, with our closed sites, so Pog Lake, Wilno, and Barry's Bay, your recommendations in there are, we're going to ask that we're done now. We're done. We're not going to monitor anymore. Allow us to stop, allow us to remove wells. Would it help, besides just being in those annual reports, would it help to have a council resolution specifically identifying that, added on top and presented with the reports? To try and push the ministry to say, besides just, having a recommendation and a report, that we're on this and we want these sites done to free, would that help?
Yeah, I've never included that before, but I don't see why it would hurt. Certainly, if you guys are willing to do that and show the support for for discontinuing or modifying those programs, it'd probably be another line of evidence to help support. Like we have the scientific side of it that Alana has worked on, and then I think you guys speak for the community, so that probably wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Councillor Mike. I don't think that would hurt at all. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so should we have 3 separate resolutions for each of the sites, or one resolution that would cover all 3 sites? Because we're well past, the monitoring periods are 25 years, I think, right? I think that's what we're trying to state here. We've met the terms and exceeded, and as you said, the scientific data supports, and we want to get this off our books.
I think you could probably just do one council resolution, because the way that we'll do it is Alana will prep 3 separate letters, and she can just reference, she could put the resolution in an appendix in that letter. And yeah, as long as it says in the resolution all 3 sites are identified, then her letter, we'll be able to pick it up, and the linkage will be made that way.
Sue?
Thank you through the chair. So if I could suggest, Lana, when those letters are drafted, if we get a copy of them, we would bring it to council in a report and then have the appropriate resolution that we can forward at that time.
What's our
deadline? Just for the wording.
What's the deadline to submit the reports, though? Yeah, so we need to do that today.
Oh, okay.
Suggest to forward this as in a resolution stage, and we'll get to it, just appropriate for reduction in monitoring for Wellno and Pod Lake. And
I
make a
just
resolution.
was cautioning that we have the appropriate wording, that's all.
Yeah, but could we make
I think
blanket?
they're right in the report. Where is the? I'll just pull. Which one is this one? Very space. So.
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah.
So just I just want to see here. So just to ensure that this is what we're asking, the discontinuance of the post-closure monitoring and reporting for the following sites, and then name the sites. Is that what we're?
As identified by Pynchon in the annual reports. The council supports Pynchon's, because you've given 2 options. You're saying we want to discontinue and remove wells, and then if the ministry isn't okay with that, well then here's what we're going to do. Let's get the second part not acknowledged, and let's go with the first one. We've met the 25-year monitoring period, the final cover, these sites are closed. Your wording, right? And to stop monitoring and remove the wells. It's in the report, so just pull the words from the report, but the Township Madawaska Valley supports recommendation 1, which is
Through the chair, might I suggest that we take a 5-minute recess? Just because
All
this
right,
is so
let's-
crucial. I
let's-
don't like just putting it
Yeah,
together.
let's-
I'd like to have the appropriate wording.
Yeah,
and
let's
then I
make
can
sure
read it out.
it's correct before we present it. So could I get a mover for a 5-minute recess? Councillor Micah, second by Councillor Olszewski. All in favor? That's carried. And so we will be back in at 11:05.
Thank you. So following discussion with Pinchin, there will be a report on March 18th, and council will have a recommendation that can be attached to the ministry with the approval letters.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, where do we want to go from here? Here.
MEC action. The MEC action.
Continue with the presentation
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
action plan. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so as Hillary sort of mentioned, the MECP did do an inspection of the active Bark Lake landfill as well as the two waste transfer sites, so Radcliffe and Wilno. And they identified a couple of non-compliance items and requested that we submit an action plan by March 31st outlining how we're going to address each of the non-compliance items and a timeline for addressing each one as well. So I'll just go over what our proposal includes. So for the Bark Lake waste disposal site, there were 4 items identified of non-compliance. Items 1 and 2 had to do with inadequate daily cover material and inadequate daily site inspections were determined to be the cause of that as well. So that item would be covered by the township. Hillary has taken immediate action already to ensure that the daily cover and the inspection procedures comply with the conditions of the ECA. So the action plan would reflect that that item's already covered. For item 3, had to do with the waste volumes and quantities reported in the annual monitoring reports. We did report the total annual waste volumes, but didn't specifically lay out the daily and the weekly volumes. So in the 2024 report, we did fix that, and in the action plan, that will be outlined as well. Item number 4 is still outstanding. So that one has to do with the emergency response plan for the site wasn't available and needs to be submitted to the MECP. So in our proposal, we've included a cost for Pinchin to prepare an emergency response plan for Bark Lake. For Radcliffe, 4 items were identified as well. Similarly, the emergency response plan wasn't available, so our proposal includes a cost to do an emergency response plan for Radcliffe as well. Item number 2 has to do with the inspections for the transfer station, so that item is covered by the township's operations, and the action plan will reflect that one has been covered. 3 and 4 have to do with the site's D&O plan, which couldn't be located at the time of the inspection. So Hillary did locate the closure plan for the site afterwards, but the D&O plan is not located or may not exist. So our proposal includes a cost for us to prepare a D&O plan for the site, and the action plan would propose that be pushed out to 2026 in order to consider the blue box transition, so that the D&O plan is going to be reflective of the most current operations for the site. For Wilno, there was only 1 item but had to do with the volumes reported in the annual monitoring reports. So they observed tires, electronics, and ashes waste at the sites where volumes weren't reported in the annual monitoring reports for those items. So we added that in the 2024 reports, and the action plan will outline that. And then the closure plan for this site can be located as well. Hillary did find that one afterwards, and that will be submitted along with the action plan to the ministry on March 31st. So our proposal costs, there's we would do those volume revisions for Bark Lake, and we'll note in the report. So that's technically, we've already gone ahead and done that item. And then we would prepare the action plan for all 3 sites to be submitted on March 31st, which would outline the items that have been addressed and the outstanding items left to be completed and when those would be completed by. And then the development of the emergency response plans for Bark Lake, for Radcliffe, and development of the DNO plan for Radcliffe in 2026. And the total cost would be $9,985. So once we have approval of this proposal, we can go ahead with that action plan. And I think that's all we have.
All right. Questions on the action plan? Sue?
Through the chair, I would like to add to your existing resolution the cost of the action plan. And if you, that way, if you approve the scope of the work. To approve the cost? No, I was going to add it to that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Just because the resolution, it refers to what we're approving and to what to proceed with, but it doesn't really approve the scope of the proposal as well as the cost.
No, that's a good idea.
This resolution doesn't even, it doesn't even mention it.
I know I would like to add that to it.
Yeah.
Lana or Tim, can I ask, I'm just curious on the Radcliffe, on item number 2, it says, in condition 34 of the ECA, shall be inspected daily for the transfer station and weekly for the remainder of the site. That transfer station is not open daily. So I'm not sure why we would inspect it on days where it's not even open or receiving anything. Like it's locked.
Yeah, we would try and we would fold that into the DNO plan that, the site's not open every day. So every day that it is open is when we would have to do those inspections.
Right. Okay. Maybe we should change that because we're not going to have somebody go look at the gate that's locked.
Yeah.
Hillary, is there a reason for that?
Well, no. Okay, the inspections, it says now daily inspections. There's a whole binder of daily inspections here. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know how the inspector picked up on that, but there's no inspections done. And everything that's in the ECA is inspected. So we're going to respond back on that one and say, here's the inspections for each day it's open. That's our opening. I'm looking after that.
Okay.
Because I researched all this and I don't know where she picked up on that.
Okay. No, fair
She
enough.
didn't ask for
It just jumped out at me and I thought we're not going to have staff time to inspect something that's not even open. Fair enough. No, good enough. Thank you.
All right. So, Alana, do you have anything else? Nope. Tim?
Not for me.
All right. So, Sue, do you have the resolution?
Yes, through the chair, that council approve the MECP action plan proposal as presented and approve the cost proposal in the amount of $9,985 and the scope of work.
All right. Could I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any further discussion?
Just clarification, so the annual monitoring and reporting line is where it would be expensed from, just for council information.
Okay.
May I? No, it would be expense from site compliance, Bark Lake expansion, and Blue Box. Each one was pre-populated.
Okay.
Going into the budget thing, I spoke to Amanda. Here we have some expenses, so it'll be site compliance. There's 12,000. Bark Lake expansion, which kind of goes into this on an operations plan. Our Blue Box transition for Radcliffe, we have 3 places
Okay, so it'll be
So
Basilica
I've
South.
already covered that in my
Okay.
preliminary budget, in my mind anyways.
Okay,
Okay.
thank
So-
you. I just want so that
That's
it's reflected in the minutes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, I call a vote. All in favor? That's carried. All right.
Thank you.
So that is it for the,
This one? The council accept the draft? Okay, well, we need to do that.
yeah, we need to do that one too.
Thank you. Through the chair, that council accept the draft 2024 annual monitoring report, AMR, for the following 5 waste disposal sites: Bark Lake, Radcliffe, Wilno, Barry's Bay, and Pog Lake as presented. And that council direct the operations manager to forward this resolution to Pinchin to finalize the 5 reports, along with this authorization to sign to meet the reporting deadline of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, for 2025.
Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Olszewski. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, thank you. All right, so we do now have a in-camera session. So I do have a recommendation that the meeting enter in-camera session at 11:18 to discuss matters pertaining to personal matters about an
Mark, sorry,
identity.
through the chair, I just want to note, Hillary made a comment that we haven't discussed the waste capacity. Potentially.
Sorry.
It's okay. You can't see him. He's holding his hand up here. But perhaps Tim and Ellen, I just want to chat about that a bit before we leave that discussion.
Okay. Hillary, do you have anything to say? I can't see you.
Oh, your waste capacity review, the drone from 2024. In the fall, we did a drone, and that's how we came to 9.5 years. If Tim and Alana want to expand on that.
Yeah, for sure. Alana, can you pull that other presentation up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think as most parties on the call know, we survey the site every year topographically, most recently via a drone, as it gives us the most, like essentially every pixel in the imagery is the equivalent of a survey shot. So it gives us a ton of data and information on the site. So we do that every year, and then we compare the surveys together, and then from that we are able to calculate what you bring into the site on a year-to-year basis. So Alana, do you want to speak to this at all or no?
You can continue.
Okay, thank you. So the volume that was existing in the site currently was 114,000, I think, is what we came up with, and your approved volume is 208. So we're very careful not to try and extrapolate landfill lives on a single year. I think we've had that discussion in the past. I think there was the 1 year, obviously you had the COVID boom, but I think there was also 1 year you guys had a school demolition or something. It was quite a sizable influx into the landfill. So Alana, usually, if the data exists, our team will, usually use a 5-year running average for your annual fill rate. So based on the most recent data, our average annual fill rate is just a hair under 10,000 cubic meters a year. So based on that, we were able to calculate that we have about 9 years of lifespan left. And that essentially, it's very, very simple math. We take what you have in the site now, 114,000, subtract that from your approved capacity of 208. It gives you, about 95,000, and divide that by your average annual fill rate, and that's how you get your 9.5 years. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. Hillary, was there anything else you wanted us to speak to on this, or?
Well, actually, I think you're on the liability report, but that's kind of goes hand in hand. The capacity report, there's measurements, they sent some nice maps, and I believe that we have a good thing going there, Tim. We're not above the contour. Above.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so
anywhere on our site, we're not above the limit. So there's,
yeah.
And I got them to extrapolate the measurements within the grid lines, and now we know we're gonna take it a step further, and we're gonna conduct from the west end. We're gonna start closing off appropriate cells and working towards that limit. That's our goal.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Hillary. Thanks for bringing that up. So in this waste capacity review, you can see here the aerial imagery, the high resolution aerial imagery. It's got the brown color versus the green, background from some other imagery that we use. So the aerial imagery, it's brown because we fly it in usually in the latter part of the year when we're vegetation free. So we don't have any interference from grasses or from, foliage on the trees and that sort of thing. So we get a true image of what the ground surface looks like. And then we also do what's called a bare earth model. So we convert that data into, ground surface. So you can see here, it's a little bit hard to make out, but we do have that black line that was presented on our feasibility study. So that's our landfill footprint. Like that's where the garbage is supposed to, lie within. So yeah, to Hillary's point, we're pretty much right in line with that. It looks like there's some stuff going on the eastern side, but again, that's probably just some boro material, into the hill and that sort of thing. Alana, can you go to the next figure, because I think that it shows better the final contours. Yeah, there we go. So these are the design contours. Like this is the way the site's designed. So, as per the discussion earlier, we would have the 4-to-1 side slopes on the, essentially on the sides that face the highway. But the rest of it is actually built into the hill. And the intent of that is to, exactly what you guys said. Like you don't want this thing to be an eyesore. So we kind of want to make it, blend in with the natural topography as best we can. And now that we're in a position where we're approaching final contours, there's a real opportunity there to progressively close the landfill. And at which point, again, it takes away some of those visual concerns, let's call it, because you're going to be able to, cap it, close it, vegetate it. Alana's doing some really, really cool designs. Traditionally we just put, grass, different kinds of grasses on it. Alana, with some of her more recent landfill closure designs, she's taken me into the next century, and we're also including pollinator friendly species. So we have like lots of wildflowers built into it, because that's something that's really important nowadays, is trying to protect pollinators and giving them a friendly environment. So we're taking, there's a potential there for us to take something that's, an environmental negative and put it in a condition where we're making things much more friendly. So essentially what we do, and I apologize, I should have showed this earlier. So what we would do is, take these contour lines that are on here, and if you could imagine that purple area that we had down to the south, essentially those lines would just extend down into the purple area, and then again we would blend them into the hill.
Tim,
yeah,
may I ask a question?
Sure.
On site A, which is the existing site, are we advantageous to begin, I'm going to call it from the west, where you're driving in up the hill, to finish that off to the exact contour as site B, the purple that you have suggested, will that integrate with the east end of our existing site?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
should,
so phase one, the purple area, like I said, is just we would just build off of your existing thing. And instead of having that little fold in the contours that go back to the hill, we would just extend that, and follow the same contour line. So you'd have a 4-to-1 slope all along that side that's going to continue down to the full extent of the purple triangle. And then the baby blue triangle where Alana's hand is waving around up there, we would do the same thing. We would just kind of follow that 4-to-1 slope as long as we could follow it. And we would prep the base there by digging into the hill as much as we could.
so we should,
And again, if it's bedrock, obviously that's going to be a limitation. We're not going to propose to blast or anything like that because that would create, preferential pathways for groundwater and fractured bedrock. We want to avoid that. But yeah, I think
so we should
there's some
concentrate all our efforts moving forward on the west end of our existing site, get that on grade to at least half, and then integrate the second half if we ever get expansion.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. If you can get that the west and north end to these slopes, and you're close, you're very close. If you can get, these tidied up, then yeah, there's a potential there that you could cap and close this as you go along.
Thank you.
So Tim, on that subject, is it your team? Are you going to go out in the spring and shoot the grade and put in the grade sticks so that we're accurate on what we're doing to cap that? Or is that something that we would be doing on our end?
I have to be honest, I don't remember what the agreement Hillary and I had on that was.
No, the plan moving forward, I'm going to get a surveyor to outline the north side of the site exactly on grade, and then we're going to get a surveyor to shoot the middle white things, the grade stakes, and we're going to take it from there through.
Okay, so we're doing that work though.
We're doing
internally.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to get it to OLS. Okay. That's the plan.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know.
To find outer perimeter and then grade them white lines. And then once we have grades, then I'll take it from there. That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Hillary?
Yes. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to thank both Tim and Alana. Very informative again today, and we have lots to consider, and we look forward to working with you again shortly. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for the opportunity. As usual, I really appreciate everything you guys do for us and let us, participate in this work with you. It's exciting stuff for us, so we do appreciate it. And yeah, maybe you guys can pass a resolution after we get off to have Alana do all the presentations from now on.
Thank you.
All right. I know you guys got lots of items to take care of, so we'll drop off. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we do have an in-camera closed session, as I mentioned. I do have a recommendation that the meeting enter in-camera session at 11:31 to discuss matters pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, pursuant to Ontario Municipal Act 2001 C25 S 239 brackets 2 brackets B. Item 1 is human resources matter. Could I get a mover to go into close? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Olszewski. All in favor? And we are in camera. Brittany
Okay.
Okay, in the in-camera session, direction was given to staff. So the recommendation is that the Council of Corporation, the Township Madawaska Valley, has given direction to staff. With that, we have a confirming bylaw recommendation.
Sorry, through the chair, can you get a mover and seconder for that?
Oh yeah, I need
Thank
that too. Sorry. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any further discussion? All in favor?
You can't see our hands. You're usually sitting beside us.
Okay, carried. All right, so now we'll move to the confirming bylaw. Recommendation that bylaw 2025-29 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley. Special council meeting of March 7th, 2025 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed the 7th day of March 2025. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Micah. All in favor? That's carried. And we have a motion to adjourn. Recommendation that the special council meeting adjourn at 12:09. Could I get a mover, please?
Go for it, Joseph.
Okay, Joseph and Councillor Olszewski, sorry, seconded by Councillor Blank. All in favor? That's carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.